There you go. Can you
Hi.
hear me? Hello.
Yep.
I'm plugging in
Hi.
my batteries. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So you still have to work today?
Yep, it's the last day of school. I have to go collect books and computers from kids.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, yeah. So, yeah. Tell me what you think. I mean, obviously. So let me give you a super quick background. I posted that, and I post a lot of things in all the networks,
hmm
and this is the first time I actually got any engagement from people about the issue. And the reason for it is because it goes against what's being said outside of what I would say the mainstream narrative. You know, you have a limited amount of time, so we can't go into it too deep to go into what I mean by that. But I hope we kind of understand on that. And yesterday, the first person that responded was actually a friend of mine from London that said, "Hey, there's a totally different perspective that I have." We ended up talking for like 2 hours about it, and I'll publish the video as soon as it's ready. So I am. I don't know that you said in your chat last thing you said I can hop on. We're very far from seeing eye to eye that this should be interesting, and I don't know that that's true. I think you may see that we actually see a lot of things the same, but we're maybe framing it differently. And so that's kind of what I wanted to ask you. Like, what is it that you think? You said you 100% respectfully disagree with a video I posted about Patrick where he says
hmm
he doesn't believe in white privilege because he himself is an immigrant person of color, and he worked his ass off to be where he's at, and almost by any measure that you look at him, he is a super successful person. He has a
hmm
multi-million-dollar company, employees, a super amazing family. Uh, in YouTube, he has like 2.5 million subscribers. He's living the American dream as an immigrant that came
hmm
here with nothing. So why do you 100% disagree that white privilege is not a thing? So your position is that white privilege is definitely a thing. I am
For
somewhere in
yes,
between. Right. So go ahead.
because I don't have to worry about being killed by the police, and I don't have to talk to my younger family members. Like I said, like I don't have to explain to them, if you're a boy, you don't you
You you
can't carry a pink bag down the street because
you're
like
breaking
you
up.
I,
You're breaking up. You broke up. If you're a boy, what? Sorry.
let's see if I can get a little closer to my house and it won't break up. Um,
You said if you're a
like if
boy.
you're a boy and you're a black boy, like you can't carry a pink bag down the street, like a grocery bag even, because they might think you stole it, and then police get called on you, and then you get harassed by police for doing nothing. Um, you can't do gardening in front of your house. Like people think, oh, this person's intruding on my property, I'm gonna call the police. Like I saw a video of this guy who was picking up trash around his apartment
Yep,
complex,
I saw that
like
one.
a little trash picker upper, and the police came and harassed him. Like I will never have to explain to my family members any of those things. That's white privilege. You don't have to worry about the police getting called on you and being harassed just for existing. And Candace Owen actually writes about having to work really hard to overcome just the existing, the racist comments.
Sure.
So that is what I'm talking about for white privilege. I'm not talking about money at all. I'm not talking about struggles in life, because I've had struggles, but those things don't matter because it's not about those things, which I think a lot of people get mixed up when they're thinking about white privilege. It's like, well, my life has been hard and I don't have a lot of money. That's usually how people are perceiving white privilege,
Well,
people that I'm talking.
sure. I mean, you're a scholar. You're a educator.
hmm
What is the definition of not white privilege, but what is the definition of privilege? Like, what is
Well, privilege, white privilege, I think are different.
sure? So let's go and like, what does privilege mean? Just at the grand, in the grand scheme of things, when somebody has privilege for
Hmm.
something, what does that mean?
It means access to power. It means access to resources, whether that's people resources or money, financial security, money passed down from generation to generation.
So it's something that can be obtained, right?
No,
No? I mean,
not necessarily.
okay, so you have, so would you say you have white, I mean, by definition, you agree that you have white privilege if we take your position, right?
100%.
So
Yes.
now you live in, as I do, in coastal California.
Hmm.
You live in one of the most affluent cities in the entire country, as it is, I think, right? Malibu, is that right?
I live
Oh,
in Hawthorne.
oh, okay, sorry, Hata. Well, compared to most other places, anywhere in Southern California is pretty well off. But so you obtained a lot of what you have, and you're saying white privilege is not money. It's just, is it just a cultural perception? Because if we have, I believe that privilege is something that you earn and then you have it, and you can just use it to say, like, I have the privilege. I have the
Wait, hold
privilege.
on. There's some helicopter going overhead.
Sure,
I couldn't hear you.
sure.
Okay, I heard
So,
you say privilege is something that can be obtained, can be earned.
right. I think privilege can be obtained, and you can earn it, or you can work for it. Yes, your parents can hand you down a mansion. It's like, hey, I have the privilege of living in this mansion because my grandparents gave it to me. I get that. But at the same
Hmm.
time, I could bust my ass off and invent a widget like this thing, whatever, something, and sell 2 million things of it and then buy myself a mansion, right? I could do that.
Right,
So,
right.
so what is it about white privilege that's not related to money? Because you work your ass off to be where you are. I mean, I think that
Yeah, and I,
you were not just handed
I
it.
want to clarify that I actually don't have a lot of money. Um,
Sure,
I live in a very small house. Um,
sure, but
and
you
we
have.
are,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you were breaking up for a second.
but I want to make a point that I don't have a lot. Let me go inside my house. Maybe it'll be better.
Okay.
I just want to make the point that I don't have a lot of money, but I still have white privilege. So for me, money and white privilege aren't going hand in hand.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can understand that you say that, but I think privilege comes a lot with money because privilege is have versus have nots, right? So would you say that, I mean, so the
I think
majority,
we're defining white privilege differently. Can you
sure.
tell me your definition of white privilege
Well,
or what you think
I
not?
don't, yeah, I don't exactly have one. Because I don't agree with the notion of it in the context that we're seeing it in the pop discussion right now, pop culture discussion right now. For example, the largest, if white people had privilege, that means that I would be, as a person of color, I would be less, I would have less opportunities than they do. I would have less money. They would literally be taking money from me. And then I wonder, the largest population of homeless people in the country are whites. So more whites have no homes or live in, like, worse than third world poverty in the United States than any other race or ethnicity. And that's accounting for population factors. So yeah, of course they are the most, they're the majority of the people. But even if you account for those numbers, they still have a disproportionately amount of poverty. People think, well, Mexicans and blacks have very poor, but they're not. And statistically speaking, they're better off than most white people. In fact, the the people that have the most here are not white; they're Asian. But people don't talk about that. So is there an Asian privilege? Where I'm trying to understand is how does that actually work? Because how do you tell somebody living in a trailer park with 9 people with dirt floors and nothing to eat for a day or two at a time, hey, no, you have white privilege, but this black guy that has a house with a family, he is oppressed by you that live in a white trail. How do you explain that? How does that play into it?
So I'm hearing a couple of important things.
Sure.
So we're not seeing eye to eye on the money thing. So I don't think white privilege is money.
Okay.
So that's important. The next thing is, it's not that I am oppressing somebody. It's the system that white people have put into place that oppresses somebody. So the person who's living in the dirt floors with meals few and far between isn't necessarily oppressing a black guy or a black family.
But
It's not that.
Okay, but he still has white privilege?
But he's absolutely, because for me, white privilege is the things that I said. I'm not going to get killed by police. I could put myself in the front line of a riot. I will not be shot by the police. I'm just not going to be.
What about the numbers I gave you before we started the chat, where more whites get killed by police than any other race? And that's accounted for statistical analysis.
I would want to see the statistical analysis, because a lot of things are, mathematically incorrect, or, you can skew numbers any way you want to look. So you'd have to look at, ratios of people. Like, are we looking at the same number of whites and blacks in the same community? We'd have to look more into that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we don't have the time to go into it right now, but if the numbers were right, and for example, I think 2 years ago, an exact same situation, as close as it can be, happened with a white person as it did with George Floyd, and we didn't hear about it. Literally, a cop sat on the guy's neck for minutes, and they mocked him. They laughed at him. Hey, wake up! Well, whatever. He's taking a nap. He died because of that thing. So, and that's kind of what sparked this whole conversation. Which I'm glad to be having. To be honest, I mean, like, I think we should have had these conversations years ago, because I've been posting about police brutality for years, and I was mocked by a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter, being like, hey, these people are just rousing the police. Of course they're going to get a response. It's like, no, these people were just recording the police doing something wrong. And there's
that's definitely something we agree on. There is a huge police brutality issue.
Right.
And
that's what
I think that they are more brutal to black people than they are to white people. I mean, I'm just watching what's going on around me right now, and I still see it.
Right.
But I still think that I have privilege when I step outside. I don't get a side eye from any of my neighbors, unless I'm walking around with my wife. Then sometimes we do.
So,
but we're still privileged. People have spit on us, but they've never shot us. I don't worry about my safety.
Well, that's also because of where you live. But you wouldn't take that stroll down in a Chicago suburb right now. You wouldn't. And people would look at you sideways. And people would look at you like, what is this white girl doing here? So how does that white privilege happen, right? So what I'm saying...
I don't... True.
Are you serious right now? If you walk down... There was the biggest day of black people getting killed in Chicago like 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, something like that. Largest in like 60 years. All of them were violence amongst themselves in their neighborhoods. You're telling me that you think your white privilege would keep you safe walking down that neighborhood as you would in your neighborhood right now? You could walk down the street right now at 10 o'clock at night with your dogs for a dog walk. You're telling me that your white privilege would keep you safe in that neighborhood?
I don't know.
Well, I would contend that it doesn't, because you don't have white privilege when it comes to a neighborhood that's not yours. So in a way, it's kind of like you have privilege where you are because that's where you belong, in a way, like, hey, you worked your butt to get there. People know you. But if you go down to like East LA or any neighborhood that's not yours, predominantly non-white, I don't think the white privilege is going to save you from being harassed or being looked down or being like, hey, on top of that, you being
in a predominant white neighborhood.
Okay, but you live there. This is your neighborhood. Like, people know you, right? So Like, I don't live in a predominantly Mexican neighborhood, but I'm perfectly fine. I walk my dog at 3 a.m. I'm safe this way
Hmm.
because I know my neighbors. I know, I hope nobody's going to attack me, but I do have that fear as a man. People say, like, we could have so much conversation. I like the way that you're presenting things. Like, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm having this back and forth, and I appreciate it. But people always tell me, "Oh, well, you're a man. You don't have to worry about getting assaulted in the streets and stuff." I'm like, no, if I'm walking in the street at 10 o'clock at night and you're coming my way, I'm switching sidewalks no matter what. I don't care if you're black, white, or anything. I'm just not going to have that interaction. So in the same way,
And why is that?
well, because people may do something that is, I'm by myself in the middle of the night, and I don't want to put myself in a position where I may be attacked. That's it. I was raised to be
I,
aware
I
of my
would I
surroundings.
would love to ask any of my white family members if they would feel the same way, because I don't know that they would.
Well, I've talked to a lot of my guy friends because this was a similar conversation like this we've had for years about gender, right? Like, female versus male and all that stuff. It happens to be race, and it's mostly a black issue. But we had these conversations before for other things, whether it's LGBTQ, race, Mexicans, it was Islam before. All of them have happened. But every time I've had it, at least with some of the people I've talked to, it's like, yeah, I was taught to be aware of what's going on around you and not be like, oh, walking down the street 2 a.m, like,
Yeah, that's common sense. Yeah.
yeah. So sometimes people equate that as being something that was unique to them. Like, I had a conversation yesterday I told you about, and it reminded me of me having the talk. And everybody has to talk, I think, so far. So far, I've asked my Persian friends, Asian friends, my black friends, some white friends, except the talk has been about something slightly different. But it's always down to the same common sense, like, behave yourself, be good to others, and, like, you're going to be safe. The way that the conversation is framed tends to be what the differences are. For example, the common narrative is that black people tell their kids, hey, when you get pulled over by a cop, do this, and that, and you'll be safe. Well, I was given the same talk when I was able to drive. Say, hey, if you get pulled over, you keep your hands on the wheel, you look straight ahead, you answer questions, you do what you need to do to get out of there without any trouble. And
I think that's different though from the conversations that black people have to have with their kids. Like, that I agree. Like, that's a common sense conversation that every parent should have with their child, regardless of color. If a
sure.
police officer pulls you over, you keep your hands on the wheel, you only reach for your insurance when you're instructed to do so. Sure, my parents told me the same thing. Those aren't the conversations I'm talking about. I'm
But
talking about, like, little kids can't even, like, I look at Susie's kids, right?
yeah,
They're biracial, but barely. Like, they look white, they present white, right? Those kids play with real guns. Those kids have play guns too. Well, guess what? If they were black, they wouldn't be able to play with those guns in their neighborhood like they would, because they would be at risk of being shot. So little white boys versus little black boys have a totally different upbringing that parents have to talk to them about.
maybe, yeah. I mean, I it's hard to go against that position, but I think it's,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree with that because of what's been happening so far. And yes, I mean, but at the end, I think so. I think I would propose a solution. Like, I think I have a solution. Of course, you as an educator, I think like, that's what guys always want to do, right? Guys want to come up with a solution, engineer something and fix it, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it's simple for me to come up with it. I understand that. But what would you say? How would you fix that? How would you fix if you could wave a wand around it and say, I'm fixing, there's no more white privilege. There's no more, should we even say, racism? Now, before we go into that, I want to ask you one more question. Would you agree that at an individual basis, as in you and your neighbor, you and the person a mile down the road, racism will never go away. Do you agree that that's just, as human beings, there's always going to be the odd man out that says, oh no, you're an asshole because you're black, or you're an asshole because you're white. You agree with that? Yeah.
Yes, but I think it happens at disproportional rates
Right.
to people who are.
Yeah. Now hold on for a second. We can talk about the systemic part of it and institutional part as well.
Yeah.
So what would you do to fix so that there isn't white privilege and so that there is no racism as much as you could? What would you do?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I can fix anything.
Well, imagine that's what I'm saying. Imagine.
But if I could.
Yeah, I give you
I
a
mean,
magic wand right now, and you're the dictator of the world, and you're going to fix it, and people are going to fall in line. What would you do?
Oh, I'd change laws so that they would be equal. I would.
Well, which laws? I mean, like which laws are not equal?
Like, look at the jail time for crack cocaine versus what is it? Coke.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So we know white people do coke because it's way more expensive, and black people do crack.
Right.
Same thing.
Right. One of them
way
gets longer than
different.
the other.
Way different.
Right. Correct.
Right. So we know that there's systematic racism that goes on. It's so we would have to undo our entire system. We would have to start with education, not only in schools, but in police officers and law enforcement, in judges, in juries, like everybody. It's not going to happen. If we could make it happen, that would be great. But I think it's going to take generations for it to even change. Yeah,
I agree with some of that. Definitely agree. Like the war on drugs, the war on drugs is really a war on culture, and not so much drugs, because they were not cracking down in the 80s and 90s on coke houses. They were cracking down on crack houses. So
right,
I get
but
that.
That's white privilege right there.
Well, I don't know if it's white privilege as much as like top-down racism to say, hey, look, let's not go after these people because not only do they have lawyers and they're going to fight us on this and it's going to take years to put them in jail, but they're like your cousins and they're your neighbors. So let's go after these guys that I get that.
Yeah, you're explaining white privilege right there.
Well,
yeah.
So the part about white privilege, and it's a very nebulous term, and a lot of times everything that's happening remains nebulous on purpose because then there's something to chase after. There's something to fight for whoever is fighting for it, and then at the end of the day, the reason I ask what's the solution is because most of the time, the things that we're talking about it doesn't have a solution that anybody can place. And I keep bringing this quote from somebody that I saw recently. Somebody asked Denzel Washington, like when Obama was still the president, said, hey, have race relations improved since Obama came as a leader and stuff? And Denzel just says, it's not up to him to fix that. You can't legislate love and empathy. You can't. That happens between you and me. That happens like you and me talking right now does a lot more than us doing anything like going to talk to, passing a bill. Well, just because a law is in place doesn't mean people are going to follow it. It doesn't mean it's going to change anybody's hearts. People have to have these conversations, talk about it, and understand the different points of views. And in a way, like I've agreed with you that white privilege, or maybe not the literal term of white privilege, but the concept of white privilege, what you're telling me you define as white privilege exists, and I acknowledge that. Of course, I think so too. Whether we call it white privilege, racism, class privilege, it almost is irrelevant because the issue is fixing that notion of, like the Tamir Rice waving a gun around at a park, getting shot 2 seconds after the cops arrived. Would that have happened to a white kid? It's hard to say. Probably not. But then if I look deeper at the issue, the cop got out of the car with a gun blazing. He shot him 2 seconds after he got out of the car. So I attribute that more to being a bad police issue. And
I think it's a both issue, because I think sometimes I think police might really be scared because of the way that Black people have been portrayed.
right, I agree, and I think that they've said that. And the past 3 years has the Black deaths have decreased, just raw numbers from cops, until I think even this year still lower, up to this time in the year. And some of the cops and the reports I've seen, it's like the cops say we're just afraid of doing the wrong thing and being labeled a racist or being canceled because of that. So they're even less likely to shoot Black
Well, that's
people.
good.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, but it doesn't address the fact that I see this violence and abuse of power happening every single day. Because some people watch TV, some people watch movies. I watch video, and my whole family thinks I'm crazy, but I watch videos of police accountability. Um, and a lot of these people are white, a lot of these people are Black, a lot of these people are Mexican, Native Americans, and the cops abuse them all. From like, hey, give me your ID. Oh, I don't need to show you ID, and boom, they're on the ground, handcuffed, getting beat up or getting just hassled for not falling down in line and following orders that are not even lawful. And that's when I see, top 50,000 foot view of the things, I see the cops being, an overwhelming part of this situation, because they have the authority and they have been not held accountable. They have what's called,
I 100% agree.
yeah,
100%.
they have qualified immunity. You've heard of that term, maybe? Have you or not?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also John Wayne syndrome.
Yes.
It's probably the same.
Yep.
Same thing, but
well, no,
it's not.
No, John Wayne syndrome is like, hey, I'm gonna take care of this thing. I'm the boss here. People are gonna listen to me. Qualified
And
immunity.
I'm above.
Right. Qualified immunity. Well, yeah, I guess qualified immunity is part of being above the law, and it's a clause in the federal statutes, federal code, that says, and this is for all government officials, not just cops. So that includes judges, includes prosecutors. It basically says, in the course of your duties, you are most likely going to make a mistake. You are absolved from that mistake because you were doing it in the course of your duties. So that's what qualified immunity is. And you'll see a lot of these police accountability videos when they say, hey, I don't have to show you ID because of this, this, and that. I'm doing my own video. I'm in the right. I'm in public. And they'll say all the city codes and federal codes, because at that point, then they tell the cop, hey, your qualified immunity is out the window. Now you know that what I'm doing is legal. Don't harass me. And you can see the cops immediately flip, like they can tell, like, oh crap, and they back off, or they stop being bullies and stuff. And I think that's what needs to happen more. Like that, look into qualified immunity. I think that's what needs to go away. Like, why should they have? I mean, you're a teacher.
I agree.
And you have common sense. And if you did something wrong while you're doing teaching, but it's still common sense, you will still be held accountable. Like you can't say, oh,
yes,
well, I just wanted that kid to learn, so I smacked him in the head with a ruler. Like, that's not gonna fly. You're still gonna be accountable. Yeah. So yeah, I knew that we would have more in common, because like when I met you, I think we had a good, rapport. So this is why I think chats need to happen in real life, because I'm sure we still.
I agree.
I'm sure we still disagree on a lot, but we agree on a lot of things that need to happen, and maybe how it needs to happen or how we need to bring them up to light. Maybe we disagree on some of that, but we do agree on.
Maybe, but I think you might actually believe in white privilege. You just don't agree with the definition or the wording.
No, I agree with what you say. Like, yeah, there's certain things but I think that there's certain things that everybody gets to do the same way in their own little group. Like, let's say a black guy. Like, a black guy gets to go down the street with a head, I don't know what they call those headpieces, and a wife beater, and he looks normal. He looks like them, like he is part, like if he walks down the street in his neighborhood, he's fine. Nobody's gonna take a second look. If I walk down the street like that, people are gonna give me a side look that you were talking about. That people are gonna give me like, what is this guy doing, right? So
Well, because
that,
it's out of your culture.
well, was that, so is that cultural appropriation? I mean, there's,
That would be if you were wearing it, yeah.
okay, but how come it's not black privilege? He has a privilege of wearing that without being questioned, right?
No, white privilege is for me mostly about safety and the things that I get or don't get because I'm white, period. So it's not black privilege to walk down the street with your head covering and your wife beater. I mean, it's just the hair thing that you're talking about. That's really the black thing. I see white guys walking around here all the time in wife beaters.
Well,
You know, so
how about saying the N word?
no,
No, what? That's not,
I don't think anyone should say the N word, but
well,
and I don't agree with black people saying the N word, but I'm not.
but they're, but
It's
they're,
not going to cause a safety issue.
sure it is. You say the N word. I dare you to say the N word in the middle of a black group, and you will not come
Oh
out of
no,
it.
yeah, no, sure. I'm not going to say it.
But
Not
but
going to
it
say it.
but if another person that is black says it, nobody bats an eye. So you don't think that's what black privilege? Like, what is that?
No, I
What,
don't.
so
I
what
don't
is
think
that?
black privilege exists. It's like I can call my wife a dyke, and I'm not going to get in trouble,
Yeah.
but nobody else can unless you're a dyke. So I don't have gay privilege like that. Those things those aren't privileges.
Then what are they?
Like you're just expanding the definition like really beyond where I think it fits in this context. Um,
Well, I'm just what I'm trying to get to is like, if I were to believe in the definition of white privilege as you mentioned it, I I would be on board with that. But then I also have to look at all the other privilege that we have, and all those have to be brought into conversations. You know,
yeah, but
class
I don't
privilege.
think it's relevant though. I really just
You don't
don't
think it's
feel
what?
like it.
Sorry, you're broken up.
I don't think it's relevant.
Well,
I'm talking about the physical safety and the conversations that must be had with little black boys and maybe girls too about things you can and cannot do as a black person. I'm not talking about in a group of black people being able to say the N word or wear something on your head.
okay, but
I don't.
I know you're not talking about it, and you don't, you think that's outside of that's a purview of
I
this
yeah.
conversation, but it is part of the larger conversation. So what about the black people that say black privilege? I mean, a white privilege isn't a thing. Are they wrong in saying that? You
I
know?
think we have to listen to the greater community. If you've got 99% of a population saying something, I think we've got to really listen.
Well, what if those numbers aren't that big? What if the numbers are a lot more, 40, 60, 60, 40, 50, 50? Like, does
I
that
don't
matter?
believe that to be true. Of course, it would maybe matter, but I really have seen it with my own two eyes.
Yeah. Oh, I have seen it as well. I just,
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really what I'm here discussing is that white privilege does exist. And I've been a teacher to classrooms full of black kids, like where the majority of the kids are black. And I've seen it in the school that I worked at and in the fundamental systems. And that's what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about some of those other things
sure.
because I don't think they're part of this conversation.
Well, so yeah, okay. I mean, if that's how you want to look at it, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But for people that are not white or black like me, when do we talk about the privilege that we have or don't have? Because we also have, we also represent a big part of the population, and we also get the short end of the stick in a lot of ways. Like, what do we need to do to have those conversations? I mean,
I think at this point, like the the important conversation to have is around Black people, because Black people are experiencing police brutality right now. Like, if you or some of your family were under that police officer's knee and this was a systematic problem that was happening at huge numbers, I'd be right there fighting for Latinos and Latinas, and
Right.
and I do think that Mexican people are less privileged here um, than white people. I mean, if you think about all of the crappy services that are done, like mowing lawns and installing gardens, and like all the things that are super low paid,
Do you know?
lots of times it's
Do you
Mexican
know that?
people that are doing it.
Landscapers make like bank, right? Like
Yeah, but
our
they're not
landscaper.
paid as landscapers. I had a landscaper come. My landscaper speaks Spanish, but she looks white, but she's not from Mexico. She is from, I forgot. And she's also Jewish. So it's like a crazy
Wow.
mix, right?
Sure.
She like falls into white privilege because she looks white.
Yeah. I mean, I have.
But we paid her like $11,000 and like emptied out our bank to completely haul out our
Oh
whole
no,
backyard was
I'm
dirt,
I'm
right?
talking about maintenance landscaper, like the ones that come and mow your lawn and stuff.
I know. I'm getting there, right?
Okay.
So then we're paying her this huge sum of money, and then she calls in the Mexican person to do all the heavy lifting, all the back-breaking hard ass work, and pays him practically nothing.
Right. Well, I mean that's. I mean, yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know what to say to that, but because that's just they have chosen to do that. But in the same token, I have two friends. I was talking to them last year. One of them made $192,000 and change. He's a landscaper, and he looks as Mexican as can be, and he's happy as a clown doing it, and he loves it, because
There are always exceptions, right?
right. So that is such a bigger conversation to have about capitalism and stuff, because I'm for the free market. If it was truly free, it would work much better than it is right now, but that's completely different. If I could come to you and say, hey, I'll mow your lawn for $10 an hour, and you say yes, and then somebody comes along and says, I want to mow it for $7 an hour, you would probably go with the $7 because you're saving money. But right now regulations prevent people from doing that. So why those people would be getting paid for cheap? Maybe they don't know how to start a business or whatever, but that's completely different.
Yeah,
But,
and I think a lot of them, have come here across the border without documentation, and so
sure.
that's part of it too, right? And
Right,
they
that could be it. Yeah.
sometimes don't speak English, so yes, they've chosen to do these jobs because they have to do these jobs for their family because that's what they can get. And yes, some have chosen to cross the border illegally. Some have been brought over here as young children to
Sure.
no fault of their own. So there's
Yeah.
just so many different contexts. Sorry, can you still see me?
Yeah. Yes, you'll see.
Okay, my screen went blank for a second as my battery's getting low, but there's just so many different contexts. But the reason I'm speaking now about Black people instead of about Mexican people is because
Sure.
Black people are having a big, huge problem. There's systemic racism that needs to be fixed for all, and I don't know how that will happen, but I know I'm going to do my damnedest to help try.
Sure. No, I think that there is some systematic issues. It's very hard for me to blindly accept it as a Black issue, because I see it with my Persian Indian friends, all of them. And if there is systematic racism and institutional racism, it affects us all. The only arguably, and I'm not saying definitively, but arguably the only people not affected by it are whites, if we're to believe
Right.
everything that's happening. And that may be the case, maybe not. But I always ask the 5 whys. For example, we talk about prison reform or prison, the drug offenses stuff. Well, why were those put in place? Let's go down the list as to why, and then why, and then why, and then why. And once we get to that why, the 5, 6, 7 times down the line, that's the foundational cause that we have to fix. Because right now, I think we're shooting at a moving target that hasn't been defined. I mean, by our own experience right now that we're having, we don't even agree on what privilege means, the word itself. We agree on the concept that you described and I described. We agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people are having these conversations? Very few. I've gotten a lot of hate for posting memes on Facebook. I posted a meme about the mask, for the COVID thing. Got a ton of hate. 3 people unfriended me. Okay, well, fine. I'm sure I've been unfriended by other people on Facebook. Most of them just Facebook acquaintances, not really friends. But I think more people need to have this conversation and listen to the other side. And like you gave me a poster on Instagram, and I have my own things, but that wasn't about that. It was about understanding, because if I throw all my stuff to you on chat, it's like, okay, well, is that really going to change your mind? Probably not. Is you giving me all this stuff, which, by the way, I've seen before. I follow all those people on a few different platforms. Is that going to change my mind? Maybe. I think that you're open-minded enough to listen to an opposing perspective by the virtue that you're here. And I like to say that I am as well. So I think more people need to have these conversations, either like this, one-on-one, or a small group and stuff.
It's been really nice having a level-headed, mature conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really do. And I hope we have more of this. I know you have to go. You said you have to go to work, so I'll let you go.
Shower up.
But see, I told you we would see eye to eye in a lot of things. Maybe not everything, but it's a step.
For sure.
You may be frustrated in some of the things I say, and I'm probably frustrated in some of the things you said, but understanding, because now you're going to think about this conversation for maybe a day, maybe an hour, maybe a week. I don't know. And I will as well. So one last thing I wanted to ask you. I always record my Zoom calls, and this was recorded. But would you be okay would you be okay if I publish this, or you want to keep it private?
Oh, I'm okay if you publish it.
Okay, I will do that then. I'll send you the one I had yesterday. It's super long, so I don't expect you to just sit down and watch it. It's 2 hours long, but I think you'll probably appreciate it more than a lot of people. I'll send you the link when it's up, and then I'll send you the link when it's up. All right, thank you.
Right.
And
nice talking to you.
Yeah, nice talking to you. Have a good day at work.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.